Welcome back to The Big Picture. Let's continue now with my Roger Stone conversation. Assume for a second that he gets a second term. Okay, 8 years of Donald Trump. When he's out of office, will things go back to what we've just described, or will there be any lasting change, do you think?
Well, first of all, I do expect that the president will get reelected, but in a much tougher and closer race than people think. And at the end of that 8 years, you're going to have a struggle for the future of the party. But Donald Trump has changed things dramatically. In other words, prior to Trump, we never had a president who wasn't a senator or a governor or a congressman or a general. For the first time ever, we have a business person who's president. And what we learned from this is that the pop culture and our political culture have finally merged, and therefore the greatest single qualification to be a viable candidate for president is to be well known. And therefore we can look beyond the bounds of politics and government to choose the next president, whoever he or she may be. I think that another candidate will emerge with a similar profile to Donald Trump. I don't know who that man or woman will be, but it will be someone from the world of business or perhaps entertainment or perhaps sports or some other endeavor where they've had an opportunity to show leadership and where they can display ideas that are different than the ideas we see in our two-party political establishment. And that person will have a struggle with the Republican Party establishment in Washington, who will regard Donald Trump as an aberration and will want to go back to business as usual. That's going to be an epic struggle. I hope to be around for it.
If the past few years is any example, Donald Trump was not that disliked before he became a candidate and president. And then suddenly he was elected, or even when he was running, and he became controversial, and he started leading the pack. The more successful he was, the more unpopular he became with the other side. He became president, and everybody lost their mind.
Yes.
And ever since, there has been one thing after another that they've tried to throw at the wall to see if it stuck. Controversy after controversy after controversy. Nothing has stuck, but he has done a job that's made a difference in the economy.
Enormous difference.
Arguably, the country is much, much better off than it has been in a generation. It's been a struggle, and I don't think that the Democrats have spent any of this past couple of years suggesting legislation or things that could help the country. Assuming he gets elected for another 4 years, do you see that changing? Do you see it getting worse? Do you see it getting better because they're not going to have to worry about him getting reelected? How do you see that developing?
I think the largest single problem for the Democrats today is they don't have any counter agenda. They're running on one central idea. We hate Donald Trump. There is no other. What's their program for job creation? What's their program to address the trade imbalance? What is their program to fix the immigration problem? They really don't have any. And it is very hard to judge a president within his own time. It's in fact impossible. All the things you just said about Trump, those were all said about Abraham Lincoln. He was a very unpopular president at the time of his murder because his opponents told incredible lies about him. This was also true of a great New Yorker, Theodore Roosevelt. He's an egomaniac, he's a lunatic, he's a narcissist. None of those things were true. He's one of our greatest presidents. So you cannot judge the Trump presidency in the moment. I think you'll have to judge it afterwards, but on the basis of just results. 6 million new jobs created, wage growth at the fastest pace in American history, billions of dollars coming back into the country to be invested here, to expand here, to create jobs here. African American and Hispanic unemployment at the lowest point since we began keeping those statistics. He's already going down in the history books now after one term as a historic and great president. Think what he can do in a second term when he's unencumbered with the idea of re-election.
Okay, Roger Stone, you are viewed as a controversial figure. I think you enjoy that to an extent. I think
it sells books.
And the people attack you because of that personally. I mean, and they try and take your message, as is very common, they take your message and they kind of degrade it and say that it's not valid because of the personal attacks. So they try and throw the message out with a...
Who does that sound like?
So, yeah, exactly. What do you say to that? And is it something that you pursue on purpose to be controversial just to get the attention? And does that help or hurt when you try and get a serious message out?
Well, first of all, I've written 5 books. 2 of them are New York Times bestsellers. 4 of them are Amazon's bestsellers. You interviewed me for my first one. It was very successful. It's amazing how many people want to tell you about Roger Stone who've never read my books. I have 2 websites, stonecoldtruth.com and stonezone.com, where I've written a weekly column on politics for decades. White supremacist, I was in favor of the Voting Rights Act. I thought that Reagan not renewing it was one of his biggest mistakes. I still argue in favor of affirmative action, a Nixon administration proposal to give folks a hand up who were traditionally discriminated against. I'm against the war on drugs because I think it's been an ignominious, expensive, racist failure. I championed a pardon for Marcus Garvey, the early civil rights leader who I think was submarined by the FBI in an illegal takedown. So people who say, oh, Roger Stone's a white supremacist, they don't know me. They don't know what I've been talking about, writing about, marching for, crusading for 30 years. So I just ask people to do a little research. You may not like the way I dress. You may not like the way I comb my hair. You may not like the fact that I'm prepared to call out both Republicans and Democrats. But what you see is what you get.
Do you feel the need to defend yourself, or you just think, follow my work?
Well, look, politics ain't beanbag, as they say. This is a rough and tumble business, and I've given as well as I've taken, but I don't believe I've ever crossed the line. And it really aggravates me to see Roger Stone, quote, self-described dirty trickster. I've never described myself like that. Now, some Democrats have, but most of those Democrats are ones who I have beaten in fair elections. So I don't believe I've ever employed tactics that are outside the norms of my contemporaries in both parties. I'm not going to apologize for who I am. Millions of people have read my books. Millions of people have supported me. Millions of people have read my website. You can like me, you cannot like me. But I'll tell you this, I would never assault someone in the street because I disagreed with their politics. Happens to me every day. I don't know, we're in a strange place in America where the country is now so polarized. I had for many years a lot of friends in the Democratic Party who I ate with, who I drank with, who I debated with, who I argued with, who I had great affection for. You don't have that kind of comity anymore. It just doesn't exist. Our politics are so polarized, everyone is forced to take sides.
Well, I know we're on a time deadline. I wanted to ask you a couple more questions, but the most important question is, you're here now, you're raising funds. I assume this is to help you defend yourself because you have been indicted. Is there anything you'd like to say to my audience?
Well, there's nothing I can say. I'm here to talk about the president's reelection and my analysis of the political scene. The proceeds from tonight will go to my legal defense fund. I'm very grateful to Carl Palladino and many of my friends in Western New York for putting this together. Whenever in life, when you go through adversity, you go through difficult times, you learn who your real friends are. This is the great advantage of it. And I've had difficult times in my life, and I have learned who my friends are. And I must tell you, I have many true friends in Western New York.
If anybody wants to help out with the fund, how can they get in touch? How can they do that? StoneDefenseFund.com. Beyond that, I really can't comment. Okay. All right. Well, good luck.
Thank you.
I'd like to thank Roger Stone for being my guest on The Big Picture this week, and I'd like to thank Carl Palladino for setting up this interview. We'll all be waiting to see what happens to Roger as a result of his fight with Robert Mueller going forward. Now, I'd like to leave you with a quote that is near and dear to my heart, and certainly food for thought for many of you out there who lead what might be termed a normal life and often marvel at the characters we hear about so much in the daily news. The quote goes something like this: "To the crazy ones, the misfits, the rebels, the troublemakers, the round pegs in the square holes, the ones who see things a little differently. They're not fond of rules, and they have no respect for the status quo. You can quote them, disagree with them, glorify or vilify them. About the only thing you can't do is ignore them, because they change things. They push the human race. They push the human race forward. And while some may see them as the crazy ones, we see genius, because the people who are crazy enough to think that they can change the world are the ones who do. Steve Jobs. Think of that the next time your kid has one of those nutty ideas. Anyway, I'd like to thank you for watching The Big Picture. I consider this to be your show, and I welcome your feedback and your ideas. And of course, once again, thank you for watching WBBZ-TV, your hometown TV station.